Jai Hind, Saraswati Sisukunj Bhagwala Borsad, Standard 8 Subject Science, and today chapter number 12 Friction. Don't get surprised. Now today we will start the second part. I hope that in first part you have seen the basic information about friction, right? That is maybe definition you have seen, that friction is a force that opposes motion between two surfaces. Motion between two surfaces means, if consider that this is one surface and there is the other one. Now there is a motion if one surface is sliding over the another. I am not specifying here the shape of the surface, right? Maybe it can be ball or pen or a book or anything, right? So here this is a steady surface and here one surface is moving on the other one. So the force which is opposing this motion is known as friction. I hope you understood that definition, right? Okay, you also have studied about the spring balance, right? That spring balance is used to measure the force of a friction. What is the amount of a force? Now friction is a force, so we are actually measuring the force, but which is connected with the friction, right? So that you also have studied. Now force of friction, I am asking you, right? Force of friction is same for every surface, so we need to find out that thing. For that we need to try different surfaces and we need to identify that is friction is same. Here we will observe the speed of moving object and then we will come to know that what it is it same or is it changing. Okay, so be ready, we are going to do one activity. Okay, so see here, I have one arrangement. This is one surface on which our object, that is this pencil cell, will move. I will leave this pencil cell from this much height and it will move on this table. We will change the surface. First we'll take this simple bench, then we'll use a paper, right? Then I will use some rough surface. So let's observe, and what is going on that you have to see. See here, I'm leaving this cell from some height, it moves, right? And it moves very smoothly because this is smooth surface, right? See once again, it moves. Maybe it changed the direction, but it moves smoothly. Okay, now see here, let me change the surface and I am here keeping this paper. Maybe the friction, or we can say force of a friction, is a different. In this paper it is a different compared to this smooth bench. Okay, let's see here. It gets slow here in this part. It gets slow for a second, no? Okay, see again. Okay, then it continues with its regular speed. Okay, so we can say here there is a little bit more friction compared to this surface. Now again I am changing the surface. I am using this rough surface. Here you can see, right? This is a rough surface. Okay, now I am leaving here a pencil cell. See, it stops. It stops. It is not going ahead. It stops here, right? Look here, position of the cell I am not changing that. I am leaving from the same height. Then also it stops. Look. So we can say that here the friction is more. Why? You can see here there are more irregularities. The surface is not smooth. This is a smooth surface, right? There is no irregularities. Here you can see these are irregularities, right? Okay, what is the meaning of irregularities? You are a bit surprised, okay? Now let's understand what are irregularities. When the surface changes, the friction increases. So that we can say it is a factor that affect friction. What it is? That is factor that affecting friction, right? Now I am talking about irregularities. So what is irregularities? Okay, see here. This is my first surface on which I will slide some, that pencil cell. So here there are irregularities. Even on the smoother surface, there are some irregularities which we cannot see with naked eyes, but there are some few irregularities. Okay, what I am doing, I am sliding that pencil cell on it, right? So we will consider this as pencil cell, right? And it also has some irregularities. So this irregularities and this irregularities, when they are getting together, it will increase the friction. If one surface has more irregularity than the other, so there will be a friction, but a little bit. If both surfaces has more irregularities, means more friction. If both surface has less irregularities, as our first case, that table, it has less irregularities, and a cell, the surface of the cell is also so smooth, right? So that was, it was going smoothly. Then I took paper. So paper has little bit more irregularities than compared to the table smooth surface, right? Then it will become little bit slower on the paper. And then last surface that I took, if you remember, so on that last surface, it was so many irregularities, so that cell stops on it. So this friction depends on the irregularities. So next topic is friction, a necessary evil. Now here two words, necessary, evil. How an evil can be necessary, right? It means it has advantages and disadvantages. So we cannot say that friction is so good, or we cannot say friction is so bad force, right? But it actually helps also, and there are many disadvantages by which we need to suffer with many problems. Okay, let's start about benefits first. Okay, so are you able to hold anything if it is a glass cup or any stainless steel cup, right? The surface of those cups are so smooth and glassy finished, but you are able to hold that glass. Why? It is because of friction and irregularities which is in your hand, and that creates a tight hold on it. That is why you are able to hold it tightly. Let's take the second example. Are you able to walk? Sure, just try it. So we are able to walk because of friction. Now just imagine the marble floor if you have at your house, and it becomes so oily, or we can say there is so much water on it. Are you able to walk on it? No. Why? Because the friction of that marble surface, now it is decreases, and if you will try to walk on it, you will slip. So that is why friction is useful. Let's take another example. We are able to write with a pen on a paper. It is also because of friction. If you imagine, there is a ball pen, or we can say there is a ball which is connected with the point of a pen. There are irregularities which is on a page. When you are keeping your pen on a paper, the ball moves. Why ball moves? Because of irregularities which is on the paper, right? Now imagine if there is no friction, how ball will move? Ball will not move. But ball is moving because there is irregularities, or we can say because of friction, right? Okay, let's imagine the other thing. Here, this is a board, right? And I have a chalk stick. Now just imagine there is no friction between this surface of chalk and surface of board. So how I will write on the board? It will be difficult. So I am able to writing on the board because of friction. This chalk particles, right? This chalk particle sticks on this board because of the friction. So this is how friction is a necessary evil. This is, we talk about the advantages. So now let's talk about disadvantages. So if we talk about disadvantages, so there are also many disadvantages, like your shoes, your clothes, spare parts of machines becomes useless after some time, right? Because it is always, when you are using it, it always create friction, and the work which is done by the friction, it affects the objects. Like if you see your shoes, right, sole, if you will see the sole part of your shoes, right, it is not just like same as it was a new, right? So this occurs because of friction. Your clothes also, right, it get teared, so that is also because of friction. Many spare parts of the machine also becomes useless, like ball bearing and many other parts like gear, screw, right? So this also, it is because of friction only. Okay, one more benefit that I forget. Are you able to light up a matchstick? Yes. Why? Just see the matchbox. There is a many irregularities which is on the side of a matchbox, and tip of a matchstick, when you are keeping it on and when you are rubbing it, so it creates heat, right? And that is why it lights up. Let me give you one more example that we are doing it right now because of winter. Just rub your hands together, right? If you'll rub it, here there will be friction and heat is created. So simply we can say friction creates heat. So these are in this thing what we have seen, the basic thing of friction, right? Then activity, that different surfaces have a different friction, and the last one which is here, that is friction is a necessary evil, means advantages and disadvantages we have seen. Okay, now let's think about how we can change the friction. Means we are not going into the surface, but we are using something. We will try to use something, so friction can be increased and decreased. Let's try it. We are doing it in our regular life. I'll give you an example, you will understand. So what we need to do, we just have to change the amount of friction, or we are changing the force of friction. How we can do it? Let's see. Here we will talk about how we can increase friction. We deliberately want to stop some moving object, right? So we are increasing the friction. How? With the help of brakes we are stopping our vehicles like bicycles, cars, scooter, bike, etc. Because we want to stop that moving wheels. It is rolling, no? We want to stop that. Kabaddi players, if you have seen, they are applying soils on their hands, right? Or in the wrestlings also you have seen, they apply soil on their hands because to fix the grip, to increase the grip, right? And to increase the friction. Next, have you seen gymnasts? They are also using powder-like substance on their hands, on their palms especially, to increase hold on the poles and different things. So their hands will not slip, right? There will be a tight grip on the poles with their hand. They will increase their performance by doing so. Here they are increasing the friction actually. Okay, now let's talk about reducing friction. How we can reduce the friction? If you remember, we sprinkle powder on the carom board so we can play that game very easily and our striker moves very smoothly on the board. Okay, let's take other example that we are using oil at the hinge joint of the doors. So the doors can move very smoothly without making that noise, right? Okay, let me give you one more example that we are using different oils, or we can say lubricants, in our motor vehicles like bikes and cars. Don't get surprised, you are thinking that what are these lubricants? So the lubricants are substance that reduces friction. What are lubricants? Lubricants are the substance that reduces friction. In the case of carom board, that powder is a lubricant. In the case of that hinge joint, that oil is a lubricant. In the case of our motor vehicles, engine oil is a lubricant. Means whatever substances we are using to reduce the friction, that are called lubricants. In the definition form, again I am speaking, the substances which reduce friction are called lubricants. So by using lubricants we can reduce the friction. There is another way, by wheels. Have you seen the bags with wheels? Those bags can, you can easily carry with you when you are on some trip. So those wheels are actually helping you to reduce the friction. Let's see one activity and let's understand that how these wheels are helpful to reduce friction. Here you can see a book, and I will try to move this book with a little bit push. See how much distance is it able to cover. See here. So let me mark here. Right now I will start with the same, but I will change it with some wheels. Now I am using here chalk sticks as a wheels. I am using more wheels, so there will be very less friction. See here. I am keeping this textbook on it. Remember, this is our first mark. Up to here our textbook, travel without wheels. Okay. Now again I am pushing this textbook from here, and let's see. Okay, now it travels up to here. You can see by adding wheels, the friction reduces, because this was the first point without wheels and this is with wheels. So it travels a little bit more, this much. It travels more with wheels. So we can say that by using wheels we can reduce the friction. When I'm talking about wheels, now new type of friction we need to understand, that is called rolling friction. See here. So this rolling friction, what is this rolling friction? See this. This is one body and this is, just imagine this is my chalk sticks, right? There are many. Okay, so when one body rolls on the other body, when one body rolls over the other body, the opposing force is known as rolling friction, right? Rolls, no, I am talking about rolls because wheels always rolls. It doesn't slide, it doesn't slips, no, it rolls. So that is why there is rolling friction. When one body, this is one body, rolls over the surface of other body, once again, when one body rolls over the surface, this is surface of other body, there is a resistance to the motion of this moving body. Now let's talk about the definition of this rolling friction. So when one body rolls over the surface of other body, again when the one body rolls over the surface of other body, there is resistance to this motion. Resistance to this motion is known as rolling friction. Now action here is rolling. This body is rolling over the surface of the other body, right? And there is resistance. One force is that trying to resist the rolling motion. There is one force which is trying to resist this rolling motion, is known as rolling friction, right? So I hope you understand the rolling friction. I am not saying that the roll, when you are adding the will, the thing will not stop ever, right? Because if you imagine that there is no friction at all, so when one object comes in a motion, it will continue, it will never stop if there is no friction, right? So when we are adding the will, it will just decrease our work, right? It will decrease our work, but there will be some friction, or we can say it will decrease the it will reduce the friction, right? But there will be some friction, there will be some amount of friction, right? So there is one rolling friction. Let's move ahead. Now here we need to understand the next friction, that is sliding friction. So now this sliding friction. Now here in the rolling friction, the force which was opposing the rolling motion, in sliding motion same thing. The friction force that oppose the actual relative sliding motion. Now don't get confused, what is this sliding? If you will understand the sliding, you will understand the sliding friction. Most of us have enjoyed the slides, no? We are on the top and we slide from top to down on the ground. That is sliding. But at that time when we are sliding, right, we are in the under the force of gravitation, right? Due to gravitation we are going down. But at that time also there is a force which is trying to resist us, right? So that is the sliding friction. In most of the machines, this sliding friction is converted into the rolling friction by using ball bearing. They are using ball bearings to convert the sliding friction into the rolling friction. See here in the image, you are able to see ball bearing, which is used in many parts of bicycles, even in fan, right? Even cars and motorbikes, because there are many parts which need to move smoothly. That is why these ball bearings are used in wheels of this kind of vehicles. Now see here, you are able to see the small balls which is in between of two rings, metal rings, right? Now imagine there are no balls. Now what those rings need to do? They need to slide one on another. They need to slide if they want to move, because it's a moving part of any kind of machine. So now those rings need to move on one another. But there is a sliding friction which we cannot reduce. So what we did? We added some small metal balls into it, right? So it becomes rolling friction. And there are many balls, as I told you, right? There are more rolling part, the friction will be less. There are more rolling part, the friction will be less. Here you can see many balls are there, and it reduces the friction, right? So I hope you understand this sliding friction, rolling friction, right? And I hope that you get the definition too. Let's move ahead. Okay, now let's talk about next friction, that is fluid friction. Now what is this fluid friction? So fluid means here we are considering air and any kind of liquid as a fluid, right? Gases we can say, not air only, gases and liquid are considered as a fluid, right, in science. So now whenever any kind of object moves from fluid, many objects moves in a fluid, right? If we talk about aeroplanes, right? If we talk about fishes, if we talk about birds, they all are moving, means they are in the motion, the atmosphere is one kind of fluid, right? So they are moving inside the fluid. So now there is also friction, which is called fluid friction, right? Now how we can reduce that? First of all, we need to understand that how this depends. This friction depends on three things. First of all, speed of object relative with the fluid, right? Inside how much speed, in how much speed it is moving inside the fluid. Second one, shape of object. Next one is nature of fluid. Speed, shape and nature. These two things are connected with object which is moving. This thing, nature, is connected with fluid. Which kind of fluid is it? It is oil, water or anything else like gases, right? So that is nature of fluid, speed of object and shape of object. Now here, plane, if you have seen, right, there is a spatial structure or there is a spatial shape which is given by engineers, so there will be less friction on aeroplanes, right? The structure, or we can say the shape which is taken, it is from nature, right? Have you seen birds? Now compare the body of bird and compare the structure of aeroplane. So that all shapes we took it from the nature. Now see the submarine. Have you seen submarines? Yes. Okay. Have you seen fishes? Now compare the shapes of fishes and submarine. That both look similar. Most of the vehicles that we use to transport it from this kind of fluid like water or air, that is always pointed in the front side. There is always a point, right? A narrow part in the front side. Here you can see in the picture, right? So this is how we can reduce the fluid friction. Now keep in your mind, we are right now talking about how we can reduce the friction, right? That all point, rolling friction, then sliding friction and fluid friction. These all three things we understand in the part of reducing friction, right? So this is how, by changing the shape of object which is trying to move inside the fluid, what we need to do? Change the shape of an object, we can reduce the fluid friction. So I hope you understand today's topic, all the topics which I discussed, which is from chapter number 12, friction, how we can reduce the friction, how we can increase the friction, right? Advantages, disadvantages and most three important friction that we have studied, that is rolling friction, right, sliding friction, and this one is fluid friction. One more friction which is not given in detail in your textbook, that is static friction. Now static friction means which is, you know, the highest, an object which is at the static friction. Now just take, imagine this board, right? This is at the static friction. I am trying to move it hardly, but it is not moving, right? So there is a static friction, a fixed object, right, which we cannot move, that is in a contact with a fixed thing, wall, right? So there is a static friction, we can say. By definition, we can say that when a body is at a rest, this board is at a rest, right, the force of a friction which is connected with this body, right, is known as static friction. Again, when the body is at a rest, the force of the friction is known as static friction. So most of the friction point we have covered in this video. I hope you understand all the points, right? If you have any doubts, we will take it in the live class. Thank you so much.